Hello and welcome to another edition of the Talking City podcast with myself, Alex James, and Chief City writer Simon Bukowski. Simon, are you well?
I'm very well, Alex. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. I'm all right. I believe we're getting a shiny new studio, hence why we're not sitting alongside each other in Reach Towers, but changing rooms are moving in. Lawrence Llewellyn-Bowen and Carol Smiley as we speak, I'd have thought.
It's a bit like, the Etihad gets their pitch relayed every summer, and this is the studio's time to. They don't know that we don't have a break, you see.
That's it. Nice changing rooms reference for me there for the kids.
Yes. Yeah.
Right, onto the more pressing matters of the football. I've been away for a week, come back refreshed and ready for the latter stages of the Club World Cup, and City fans in it. It's been and
you
gone.
missed the inquest. The inquest. They were back, and then they were back on the plane, and now they've gone back on planes, and they are not to be seen for a month.
And that leaves them in a little bit of a state of flux because they're not back now, as you say, until the end of July. I think it's the 28th, is it, of July that they come back into pre-season training. I can't work out if this is going to hamper them or help them having a little break and then coming back in for a few weeks, as opposed to going longer in the Club World Cup and therefore having longer off and less time ahead of the Premier League season. I'm quite sure which is it's probably lesser of two evils, I guess.
Yeah, I think it probably helps them, but I think that's probably sounds a bit soft. Like, oh, glad they went out of the Club World Cup.
Yeah, it sounds sour grapes, doesn't it?
Yeah, like they would rather still be there and still be earning like £500 million per match. But I think from a player welfare perspective, it's probably for the best. Because also, like, they've been able to choose really when they come back, like, and getting 4 weeks off on top of any time they had off sort of before the Club World Cup is really more time than they usually have off. So, they've been able to choose, right, we'll have 4 weeks off and then we'll have 3 weeks of build up. And that will, that is what we as the performance team think is the best thing to do. So it's kind of been dictated by, much as it's been dictated by them losing to Al Hilal, it has been that it is at least kind of that it's more in their control, which is what they like, I suppose, rather than being dictated to by matches.
Yeah, and they've arranged a friendly fixture this week. Palermo. I can't remember what the trophy is called. What did you say the trophy was called? To put you on the spot.
The Anglo-Palermitan Trophy. The inaugural Anglo-Palermitan Trophy, which we look forward to see future episodes of the edition. But that'd be fun when City won nothing in a year and Pep's turning around and saying, my friends, we won the Anglo-Palermitan Trophy. We would not go if we did not mean. You're like, yeah, okay. That's a joke, of course, because we're not being.
And you're counting your chickens there,
yes.
Sure. If Al Hilal can knock City out of a Club World Cup, then maybe Palermo can knock them out of the Anglo-Palermitan Trophy.
Yeah, well, it's I never normally look too detailed at sort of managers of opposition teams and things like that, but I did think it was quite funny that Filippo Inzaghi is in charge of Palermo, whose brother Simone Inzaghi is in charge of Al Hilal. It's like they couldn't have picked. How many times has that happened before, where a team has played managerial brothers in consecutive matches? That must be a first.
It feels like a first, doesn't it?
Yeah, there can't be many.
I'd have the niche football knowledge to offer you an alternative to that. If you'd have told me that was a fact, I would have straight away believed you. So,
yeah, possible. I don't know. Yeah, I think it must be true, probably.
Must be true. Probably is good enough for us.
Yeah.
Obviously, that game will. I don't know if it will be the sole preseason fixture. I think that's still TBC. But that will offer the opportunity for the minutes, I guess, they didn't get in the latter stages of the Club World Cup. A few more opportunities to sort of bed in new signings ahead of the season, and one new signing's been making the headlines, I guess, in the last 48, 72 hours for probably the wrong reasons, really, in Nico Gonzalez, and this kind of suggestion that he could be sold 6 months after arriving for £50 million, which doesn't strike me as the greatest strategy I've ever come across, and feels like it would be a very, very bizarre move. I know we've sort of, or you have done a couple of pieces over the last 24 hours or so to kind of state that isn't really a realistic outcome, other than the sense, I guess, everybody's for sale if somebody offers enough money, but it doesn't feel like that's one to get too concerned about. The fact that he might be off so soon after signing, it doesn't feel like it's going to be a one that comes to fruition.
No, I mean, if they get like anything close to 50 million for him, then I think everyone will just say, all right, see you later.
Do you?
But I think so. In a sense of sort of, he's not created like lasting memories with the fan base for them to be up in arms that he was leaving. It would just sort of be a right, you've passed through, goodbye. But as you said, I don't think that will be the case. Just some stories over the weekend, basically, if we're going to sort of run through it, that his agents were sounding out other clubs for a potential transfer, and then Fabrizio Romano came in and said City were open to selling him if the right offer arrived. Now, my information was kind of like the other side of the same coin, because it's like, well, yeah, that is the case, but he's still being counted on for the season and he's likely to stay. I don't think, because like City have this policy where anyone is for sale, if the right offer comes along, and that is true, although for players such as Erling Haaland, it isn't really true, because it would need an astronomical offer or him to be so mightily ticked off that he wanted to leave desperately for them to accept an offer, that kind of thing. And it says something for how Nico Gonzalez's first 6 months at the club have gone, that he is not in that category of being super safe, whereas someone like Omar Marmoush, who joined at the same time, is, because he's more valuable to City. So if Nico Gonzalez was really unhappy and wanted to leave and brought an offer, I think City would accept it. But at the same time, the plan, the expectation is that he will stay and he will be part of the squad next season.
It would feel to me that even if somebody, I don't know who it would be really, I guess a Saudi Arabian team perhaps, but even if somebody did come in and say, okay, we'll give you 50 million to, break even and away we go, that City might find themselves in the position that they were in January, which is we could do with a player like Nico Gonzalez again in 12 months with Kovacic, Gundogan, Bernardo Silva, all potentially a year away from leaving the club. And suddenly you've got Rodri.
But also Reinders, who sort of came in and has leapfrogged Gonzalez as well, which, if you're Nico Gonzalez, I don't think you can be too happy about that. He's barely played for the last 2 months of the season, and then he's watched as some new fellas come in and played more than him already. But yeah, that is the issue. It would be kind of an admission of failure for City, really, that they went out and bought this guy and were like, yeah, he's one for the future, and then he's like, oh, just not our future. Yeah. But at the same time, if he stays. I think the problem you've got with Nico Gonzalez is it's not clear what his best position is, and it's not clear where he fits in the team. In a way that kind of like you look at Reinders and you're like, well, yeah, he's Gundogan's replacement. He's gonna come in, be sort of a 8/10, chip in with goals and assists, and be that kind of goal scoring midfielder that has been needed. Gonzalez isn't really a Rodri and a number 6, but he's been asked to play there because Rodri's not been fit. Do you kind of keep playing him there knowing that Rodri's not going to be fit every game, or do you try him as an 8, or like, but then you've got Bernardo Silva who's captain, so does he play more games than he otherwise might have done if he wasn't a captain and things like that? So and I would also say there's uncertainty kind of like across the squad. There's more uncertainty than usual because you've got a new sporting director and you've got a bigger squad than is necessary, and that Guardiola wants, and that will fit in with like UEFA and Premier League requirements. So sort of players need to go, but nobody wants to, and everyone's queuing up to say that they want to stay. So, you know, everybody can't stay, but the more people come out and say, oh, I want to stay, then everyone else is looking around and thinking, well, we all can't stay. So what's going to give here? So, you know, I don't think anyone can say that Nico Gonzalez won't be sold this summer, because there's a chance. Like, there's a chance of Gundogan going or Kovacic going or anything like that. But it, as you say, you know, he should really be seen as part of the future, having only just arrived and been signed for 50 million in January, and that is the case really. But it relies on sort of buy-in from the player to be patient enough to accept that things aren't clear, and it requires buy-in from the club to sort of set out the plan to the player as much as possible.
Yeah, it feels like Nico Gonzalez arrived in January. He must have. Oh, okay, Rodri was injured, and there was a clear path into the 11 at that stage potentially, even if that isn't his long-term best position. He probably is better suited playing further forward, isn't he? And he may well now be behind Reinders. But it feels like he must have known that it wasn't. You know, he was coming into a team that had won 4 Premier Leagues in a row. It isn't a team you can just stroll on into. I think he's 23, 24.
Yeah,
I know he's played for Porto, and he's played loads and loads of senior games. But this is still a different kettle of fish, and it does feel like he surely wouldn't have been that naive. And also, he hasn't actually played that much, which on one hand is telling, in the sense that, well, if he's not playing that much, do we really need to carry him when we've got 28 players that we want to trim down to 22, 23? But it wasn't too long ago, was it, the Newcastle game, where Pep himself was waxing lyrical about him, and it was quite clear that he had plenty to offer. You know, it wasn't a debut. Well, it was a debut at Leyton Orient for him, but we weren't talking about him after a Leyton Orient, with all due respect to Leyton Orient, in the FA Cup. We're talking about him after, was it 4-0 that game? After a 4-0 win over Newcastle in the Premier League against a team who ran City pretty close for third and will be in the Champions League next season. Like, there's clearly a talented player in there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that kind of sums up his, you know, I don't think he's perfect as a 6 in that Rodri role, but he was against Newcastle. So it's sort of like he can do it. So City have to decide whether they want to sort of keep putting him there and getting him more consistent in that position, or whether they want to sort of stick to him higher up the pitch in that regard. But like, there's definitely talent there, and there is talent to run a game and win a game for a team that is sort of playing at a higher level than he was used to. So I think the potential is there. It's just kind of how he fits into the plan, and I'm not sure he knows or they know, but that is kind of part of the wider picture, where there's still a lot of balls up in the air, and we don't know where a lot of them will will land, which we're not used to saying with City, because normally they win the league, they add one player to
and
the
it's
squad,
stable.
and you sort of know what's going to happen. Whereas this summer is a huge summer of change. So, and also, you know, we've probably not had as much stuff as we normally do this summer in terms of talking about players wanting to leave or players who might leave and speculation in that regard. Because, like I say, everyone wants to stay. So, I think this is why the Gonzalez thing is kind of it's ballooned up this week, because it sort of ticks it sort of bleeds into a lot of the bigger issues that are going on around City this summer, where fans kind of don't have the answers and would quite like the answers, but the answers aren't necessarily there yet.
Yeah. How, in terms of the Nico Gonzalez specifically, and I guess more broadly speaking, where's the line here with Hugo Vayana and might he have a different opinion to, you know, I know he wasn't official. Was he officially in January?
No,
That's a blurred line, wasn't it? Of he was
yeah.
seen about the place but wasn't officially in. I mean, is it conceivable that he comes in and goes, actually, you got this one wrong? That feels likely as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so, just in the sense that City kind of spent the whole window looking for a midfielder. And, you know, it would feel slightly strange to sign a guy from the Portuguese league when your incoming sporting director, who's already kind of helping you, has worked in the Portuguese league for the last 4 years. And also kind of like Gonzalez is a La Masia graduate. You know, his dad knows Chiqui Begiristain, and it's like a double whammy. He's got that Barcelona background, but then he's also been at Porto, where Hugo Viana has seen him up close for a long time. So it's it's kind of impossible to think that Viana wouldn't have been heavily involved in that decision, because he certainly was in not every decision in the January window, but some. So, you know, if you're City, you don't sign a midfielder from the Portuguese league without consulting your new guy who's coming from the Portuguese league. So he has to have been consulted on it. Now, whether sort of they sort of looking back at a lot of the comments around Gonzalez, it's a lot of like, with very specific needs for this holding midfield position for the second half of the season, and you know, whether you could make a case that he was brought in to do a job and to galvanize the season, and he kind of did, and you know, he's not necessarily needed for the next job this season or whatever, then perhaps. But I don't think that is what is being said. It might end up being said if he wants to leave or decides to leave, but I think he should. I think he will be part of the squad for the season, and he's already shown enough kind of potential that City kind of should invest their faith in him, really.
Yeah, well, I think he's under contract for another 4 years, isn't he? You give him a long contract, you pay big money, and as you say, he ticks a lot of boxes. I remember reading some quotes from Busquets about him when he first signed, and sort of saying he's the next person to play in my position for Barcelona. Obviously, that didn't quite turn out as planned, but if you're getting the kind of seal of approval from a midfielder of Busquets' caliber, then you'd like to think that even if it isn't 25, 26, and even if he is behind Reinders, and perhaps by virtue of the fact that Bernardo's captain and Gundogan's got so much experience, that he might sort of be competing for minutes and matches with those two. But 12 months down the line, I don't know. It just has a kind of, I know he was there last season for 6 months, but it has a kind of second season breakout vibe to it for me. That, yeah, he's been in and around it. He might be on the bench more than he's in the 11, but come next season in what you should be doing if you're Manchester City, if you lose Bernardo and Gundogan and Kovacic maybe, is well, we don't need to go and spend 50, 60 million because we've got Nico Gonzalez here and he knows exactly what we want from him and we know exactly what he can give us. Away you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
There we go.
Exactly that, really. And I think you kind of forget how not great Rodri was for so long. Like, Rodri got dropped towards the end of his second season. Like, he didn't play in any of the sort of latter matches in the Champions League. And I know the big one is Porto 2021 Champions League final. Why wasn't the defensive midfielder picked? But that was the outrage. It wasn't why wasn't Rodri picked, because Fernandinho was ahead of him at the time. And this is like an old Fernandinho, coming towards the end of his time at City, but he was still ahead of Rodri because Rodri just wasn't consistent. So that was 2 years in his career. Like, I feel like Nico Gonzalez is doing some of the same things that Rodri was, that and maybe why he's not playing that much or hasn't played that much. But Rodri is proof that can be coached. And it just needs time to settle and faith. So yeah, I think I think he has all the markings to be able to have a big impact in his second season.
Yeah, I agree. One person who won't be having an impact at City next season is Kyle Walker, who's moved and completed a somewhat surprising switch to Burnley, and nominal fee, but a big wage off the books, and kind of a remarkable 12 months in for the wrong reasons, really, for Walker. Like 12 months ago, he's captain of the club, and now suddenly he's been on loan at Milan. They turned down the option to buy, and now he's at a. I don't know if you'd have said 12 months ago, Kyle Walker will sign for the team that finishes second in the Championship. Don't think you'd have got many people saying, "Oh yeah, that's going to that feels like a likely possibility."
Not unless the team that finished second was Sheffield United.
Maybe.
Which sort of, it almost felt like it was maybe time for Sheffield United, but Walker still feels he has something to offer in the Premier League, and he's found a club that's willing to take him. I think everyone at City is looking to show we're still capable of being in the big leagues and winning big, and Walker in many ways is the same. His head, his focus completely went last year, and he wasn't able to perform at all. It was like every time he played, there was at least one goal where he was at fault for. And even, he played for England at the start of the summer and he wasn't very good. And Thomas Tuchel had to sort of field questions like, well, why on earth did you play Kyle Walker? Like, Walker is desperate. I don't want to use the word desperate, but I think desperate is fair. Desperate to get 100 caps for England, because it would be a hell of an achievement and, show, add to what has already been an exceptional career. And staying in the Premier League allows him to do that, but he has to show the consistency that that will allow him to, not give away a goal every week. Whether Burnley, they were very defensively minded. I know they scored a lot of goals, but it was defense first under Scott Parker, and whether that will make it easier for him in the sense that it won't be such high line that he has to defend or get caught out on and things like that, possibly. But it was kind of made clear to him that he had no future at City. So I think from his point of view, it's a very good move.
Yeah, and obviously no Scott Parker from Spurs. I think they were at Spurs together. As you say, I think he's 4 away from 100 for England. World Cup year. Playing in the Premier League gives him the best chance of either getting to 100 caps before then or then potentially, although this feels a long shot, even though he was in the last England squad, making it into a World Cup squad for 2026. How is it? Has the last 12 months sort of not negatively affected his legacy? Because his legacy at City is, it's there for all to see. But does it sort of cloud the picture of what we should be talking about with Kyle Walker and the impact he had at City in however many years it was, and the trophies that he won, and the difference that he made to Pep Guardiola's team?
Yeah, I think it's one of those where everyone needs a bit of time to not talk about him and to not talk about his achievements. Because
That doesn't
he
make
has
it
been
as good a podcast, they say.
No, he's sort of been he's been a phenomenal part of City's success. And he's been really, really close to Guardiola. But you could see how much Guardiola was hurt by him, his actions last season and him deciding to leave, and him going to Cheeky Begiristan and saying, I want to leave halfway through the season when City needed a leader most. A part of his legacy will have to be that Guardiola, for the first time in his career, directly intervened and changed his captaincy process because he was so unhappy with how it went last season. And a lot of City fans have not been happy with Walker since he took the captaincy, really. And a lot of the things he said have not really been well received by a lot of fans. I remember when they were at the World Cup in Saudi Arabia at the end of 2023, having won the treble. And he said something along the lines of like, well, our team will never be seen like the United team of 99. Like, we're still miles away from them. And it kind of got a lot of people's backs up because the question was like, well, why not? Like, you're really good.
Read the room a bit there, isn't it? Like,
yeah. There were a lot of things that he said, and even things that he said where he's like, oh, I'd have given up one of my City titles to win the Europa League with Spurs and things like that. And or going to AC Milan and saying he wanted more game time and things like that. And a lot of people would turn around and say, well, a lot of people wish you had less time at City, less game time at City this season because every time you played it didn't go well. So I think people just need a break. They need a clean break from him. And then over time, you can you can look back and say, yes, he was a phenomenal player and a phenomenal servant to City, who was a huge part of the success. And it was a sad end.
Yeah, it's definitely soured it a bit, hasn't it? The way on the pitch, he just wasn't up to it at City for most of, if not all of, the first 6 months of last season, and then off the pitch, it hasn't quite. He hasn't done what you feel like a club captain should do when given the opportunity to speak on, various topics and stuff. So it does feel like it's soured that legacy a little bit, but we can now have until City play Burnley, whenever that is, we can have a clean break from Mr. Walker, and with that, you can have a clean break from myself and Sai as well for a few days at least. We'll wrap up the Talking City podcast there. As ever, you can follow us in all the usual places, and we'll be back later in the week, I think, in possibly in a sparkling studio, or if not later this week, then next week. So if that's not reason to tune in, I don't know what is, really. So thanks very much for watching. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you all soon.